Good afternoon. My name is Mike Roberts. I'm CEO and founder of Warrior to Citizen, the host for this program. We're a 10-year-old nonprofit headquartered in Atlanta. We thank you for joining us in our third webinar in the series of 5. They're all aimed at strengthening the family unit and dealing with COVID-19, the crisis, and its after effect. The topic today is conflict resolution. If you think of those words, it's pretty easy for most people to understand what they mean, but let's take us over to Wikipedia. They define it as conceptualizing and methods, processes that are involved in facilitating peaceful endings of conflict and its retribution. Committed group members come together to attempt to resolve group conflicts actively, communicating information between themselves, their ideologies, their beliefs, their intentions, and the reasons for those certain beliefs. Wiki goes on to elaborate that resolution may occur in several ways. Cognitively, just thinking about it, the way disputants understand their views, the conflict itself, their beliefs, perspectives, understandings and attributes of all the above, and including their attitudes. Emotionally, the way disputants feel about conflict and how disputants act, their behavior. And today we have Warrior Citizen subject matter experts to discuss and exchange ideas about the principles that are effective to be applied in dealing with conflict with family, friends, and coworkers. Disagreements are a reality for everyone in this world. As recent events have made so clear, injustice, disagreements, misunderstandings, anger, hurt will sadly be part of our lives for the foreseeable future. However, these conflicts in our world do not have to be the catalyst for removal of our values, our day-to-day life, our dignity, respect, courage, and even honor. There are ways to work through our strife with others, finding them to be a path toward unity, brotherhood, respect, and if we would only be willing to learn how to work through disagreements in an affectionate and effective manner, we'd find a good outcome. Change starts in the home. Here at Warrior to Citizen, our role is not to address conflicts on the streets, in our courthouses, in our government, or media. Our focus is clear. Our role is to decrease conflicts in our home. However, what we speak of today, though aimed at our home, has real life implications if we were doing and daring enough, courageous enough to utilize them in our neighborhoods, communities, states, and nation. They could be a catalyst for growth of our country. Today, I sincerely hope you enjoy the content of our program. It is our hope and our desire that our mission to see families strengthen, for when families fall and fail, so does the nation. Without further delay, I'm proud to introduce my friend and fellow board member, Major General Doug Carver, former Chief of Army Chaplains, serving our nation for over 25 years, and the Director of North American Mission Board. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Mike. It's an honor to be with you again today, and I'd like to welcome those who are attending this third webinar sponsored by Warrior to Citizen. I hope that you're enjoying it. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be a part of it. We're extremely honored and pleased to have two esteemed lecturers with you today regarding the subject that we're going to be discussing regarding conflict resolution. First, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. David Lane, who's the founder of the Counseling Program, Professor of Counseling in the Penfield College of Mercer University in Atlanta. David has over 40 years of experience as a counselor, educator, and supervisor, and he also has a subject matter expertise in the area of conflict resolution. We're also pleased to have with us today Barbara Roberts. She's a licensed professional counselor as well and has been an integral part of the Warrior to Citizen program over the years. Barbara, thank you for being with us today as well. And David, with that, I'm going to turn this over to you. I can't think of a more appropriate topic of discussion after we have looked at the tragic death of George Floyd in Minnesota 9 days ago now, and how our community, our nation is responding. So what a very timely topic. And so David, I'll introduce you now and let you speak to the audience.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and I want to make sure that Barbara is acknowledged as well. Barbara Roberts, a licensed professional counselor, as General Carver mentioned. She's going to be joining in with some questions and discussion in the second half of the program. And you're exactly right. It is very timely and coincidental that we have this topic at this time. And what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes is good in the microcosm, like Mike talked about. Things start in the family and they start with our friends. They start on that level, but it's also good in the macrocosm as well. Big systems, if systems would pay more attention to the communication and worry about the correct things, is one of the ways that I think about it. Then hopefully things could be better. I read, on social media and hear in the news and read on online that people just want to be listened to, and that's extraordinarily important. I'm going to spend some time in the next few minutes. That'll be one of the things that I highlight, is listening effectively. But as I start to talk about, and as I think about communicating effectively and resolving conflict, I don't have a lot of good news for you. And the reason I don't have a lot of good news for you is because it starts with me. Any form of communication, resolving any form of conflict, it starts with me. And we've all been in situations before where we're dealing with somebody, or we're at work, or we're at school, or we're maybe just with a friend, or it certainly happens in families frequently. But somebody starts, well, I'll just use me. I'll use the I. I'll be upset about something, and I will then just go in and start demanding and start pushing and start fighting for control because I'm upset about something. One of my children didn't do what I wanted them to do or what I asked them to do, or my spouse didn't meet one of my expectations, etc. And then what happens if I go in and I start fussing at one of my children? What happens? Any self-respecting kid, they're gonna come back, and unless you've just hammered them so badly during their life that they just learn to keep their mouth shut. But hopefully that's not going on. Hopefully they feel like they have a voice. Hopefully they feel like they can say some things and make responses and have an opinion and be free to have that opinion. But any kid worth their salt, particularly teenagers, if you start fussing at them, they're going to bow up right back at you. Any spouse worth his or her salt, if you start accusing of XYZ, they're going to bow up and come right back at you too. It's hard for us to look at ourselves, and that's the bad news. Is in order to resolve conflict, I first got to start looking at myself. If I want to communicate effectively, I first have to take responsibility for how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, how I'm saying it. And we all have various ways. I'm a teacher. I've been a professor of counseling for just over 30 years. I just finished up my 30 years total. I've been at Mercer for 25 and just finished up 30 plus years total in my career. And I get accused at home of being somewhat pedantic because, teachers talk at you, they talk to you. They don't talk with you so frequently. And so if I want to solve a problem, then I have to start with me and make sure that my feelings are in check, make sure that my language is appropriate, make sure that my tone and my nonverbal communications are where they ought to be, because my goal, hopefully, is to resolve the problem. That we frequently run into conflicts because the goal is not frequently solving problems. I have seen many, many times situations where the goal was to overpower and to control. And it's not helpful. If I'm trying to resolve a conflict, sometimes I do need, if I'm in a hierarchical system, the military, for example, somebody needs to be in charge, and they need to be able to say, you do this, you do it now, and it happens because of the situations that military find themselves in. It's not an organization where a lot of negotiation is healthy, much less functional. And so there are times and situations where power is appropriate and it is useful, and somebody being in charge and in control is useful. But if I'm with friends, if I'm with my family, if I'm in my work environment, I need to be working on solving the problem rather than overpowering, rather than controlling. And so I have to constantly be assessing my motives, how I'm feeling, doing that very, very difficult self-evaluation, because something will happen and I'll get upset about it. And it's legitimate for me to be upset. It was supposed to go in this direction. Now it's gone off the rails. It's gone in another direction. And I got to approach it from a problem-solving perspective rather than out of my anger. So I first have to look at, what am I upset about? If you think about that, and I'm focusing on the me for a little bit. If I assess my motives, frequently one of my expectations was not met. You think about the last fuss you had with a significant other, 99% probability it was that one or the other did not meet somebody's expectation. My wife comes in, I thought you were going to, oh, I completely forgot. Yeah, you got a real convenient memory, and then we're off to the races, right? And that happens frequently in relationships, in all kind of relationships, because those things are spoken out of anger instead of out, how can I help you fix this? So we got somebody taking the trash to the curb on a regular basis with your flawed memory. And so if I'm acting out of my anger, it's not good. So the first thing that I've got to do is make sure that I assess my motives. I figure out what's going on with me. I find out perhaps what was the foiled expectation that was not met, or that I had. Is that expectation realistic or not? And then once I've got my motive, my mood, my attitude, the tone of my voice in check, then I can start having a discussion with somebody else about the problem and about the situation. I said I was on the webinar a couple of weeks ago, so I don't mean to repeat things that I said in that one, but I said that I mentioned that there are two things that separate really successful families that function well, from families that struggle. And those two things are the ability to negotiate and the ability to make sure everybody feels heard and has a voice in this system that we're running. And if I, as the head of the household, some people will argue, well, there's got to be a head of the household who tells everybody else the way that we're going to go and what we're going to do. That's true. Somebody's got to run the household like it's like an organization. Somebody's got to be in charge and run it and be responsible. Ideally, it's both parents. They run it and they're responsible for it. But do they allow people to have an opinion? Do they allow folks to have input like any organization? Or do folks feel vested, like their input is valued, like they have a say? Now, like everything in life, you don't always get your way. In fact, part of adulthood is figuring out how frequently you don't get your way. And that's one of the struggles that a lot of folks have, because being adults means making tough decisions. But if in my family, I can create an environment in which everybody feels like they have input and everybody feels like they can share their opinion and their opinion is going to be valued, then I'm well on the way to having things work well. I have a system in place where we can solve problems, where we can talk about things, where we can negotiate solutions, where everybody feels okay about it. But once again, it starts with me, and it starts with my attitude about it, my motivation. Am I really about solving the problem, or am I trying to overpower people? Am I trying to control people? I need to get away from those motives of overpowering and controlling, and assess myself, figure out how can I toward solve the problem, which is what ideally I want to be working on. So with that base laid, and y'all are welcome to jump in anytime. General Carver, Barbara, you're welcome to jump in anytime and ask any questions that you have. We also welcome questions from the participants, folks who are in the audience. We welcome questions from you guys too. You can use the chat feature at the bottom of the page if you'd like to ask a question. But with that said, I wanted to share with you a model of problem solving. It's really simple and it's really straightforward. I'm going to share it on the screen if I can get the technology to work. It was developed 40-ish years ago by a guy named Robert Karkoff. And Karkoff he's still around. He was trained by Carl Rogers at the University of Chicago, and he's a psychologist, and he developed an interpersonal skills-based model to train counselors and to train everybody. The federal penitentiary system, federal corrections, contracted with Karkoff, and he developed materials for them to use to train their guards and their negotiators, etc. And so he's done a tremendous amount of work. He's one of the most frequently cited psychologists in the psychological and counseling literature in interpersonal relationships and interpersonal communication. But about 40 years or so ago, he developed a model called Get, Give, Merge, and Go. Can you see? Is that on your screen? Did it come up? I'm going to try to make it the whole screen and see if I can get it to turn the page. But last time I went to the whole screen on Zoom, I could not get it to turn the page to save me. And that's probably just because I'm an old guy trying to use technology. But the model, he called it Get, Give, Merge, and Go. Now, I've also heard it called Give, Get, Merge, and Go. So it can go either way. But it starts with get. The way that I view it, it starts with get. And get is about listening. Get is about getting the information that you need. In just about any situation, it's smart first to seek to understand. Covey wrote that in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The first one was seek first to understand, then to be understood. And it's a really, really good idea to first get the information, find out what's going on, find out if there's something you're missing, if there's something that you don't understand, find out how folks are feeling. Yeah, it's working tonight. It didn't, this afternoon, it didn't work Monday night when I was trying to do it. But it's so important to listen carefully because many problems start with misunderstandings. I didn't hear what I was supposed to do, or I didn't remember that you had asked me to do that, or there's something unstated that if I had the correct information, I could move forward and I could solve the problem. We would have never had a conflict because I'm happy to do it if I have the correct information. So if I seek first to listen, and that's my responsibility, then I can get information and find out first if there is some kind of miscommunication, misunderstanding, something that could be remedied really quickly in a very simple way, just by listening carefully and getting all the information. I've had that. Before I was a professor, I ran hospitals and residential care programs for teenagers. And so we work with teenagers and families. And I cannot tell you the number of times with staff and with kids on the unit, with their families, how many times, for instance, the kids would have a phone call to one of the parents. They would talk with the parent a minute. Somebody would slam down the phone, then it's over. And then a week later, we're meeting with the family for a family session. And we find out that somebody just misunderstood, person A misunderstood what person B said. And instead of asking for a clarification and listening carefully, here's a problem that's now blown up in everybody's face and took a week to resolve. And it was just somebody misunderstood what person A said. Person B misunderstood it. So listen carefully is the first step. And that falls, again, to me. I got to make sure I might ask some questions and leave it open-ended. Well, tell me a little more about that. Explain that to me a little farther. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're saying. Can you kind of go through it again for me? And so that's my responsibility. Yes, sir, General Carver. You got a question?
I would just be curious with the abundance of people now communicating and listening via Twitter
Mhm.
or text, how that has influenced our ability to actually get information and listen.
What a,
Could you?
what a great question. And personally, I think it's hurt it. We got whole segments of the world have adapted to living in 140 characters or less. And I don't know how in the world you can get all the information that you need just from 140 characters. And I'm certain that miscommunication happens frequently, and conflict arises frequently because somebody misunderstood the intent. You know, you've seen those jokes about how important punctuation is. Let's eat, comma, grandma, versus let's eat grandma, no comma. The comma makes all the difference in the dadgum world, because it's hard in a text and in email, etc., with our poor grammar to begin with, to convey the actual meaning of many things that we want to share. So it's a great question and something to consider. That am I relying tremendously on text and Twitter and email and those kind of things for bulk of my communication rather than face to face? And face to face is ideal, because then I can hear the tone, I can see the nonverbals, etc. And if I am motivated to resolve the problem or resolve the conflict, then I am I'm desiring to get all the information that I can get from nonverbals, from subtext, from meta communication, etc., that I can possibly get. And all of that is revolves around the axis of listening and listening carefully. Then the second thing you do, if you don't understand something, you directly ask, what was on your mind? What kind of things were you thinking? What's your opinion about this? What's your feeling about this, etc.? And make sure that you get all of the information that you need in order to fully understand. You can even kind of repeat back. Well, let me make sure I got it correctly. What you're saying is blah, 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 and you fill in the blank of what you heard them saying. Then they can correct you if that wasn't exactly what they're saying, and they'll do that too. You'll say, so let me make sure I'm hearing you correctly. What I hear you saying is this, that, and the other. And they'll say, yeah, pretty close, but there's also this, and they'll add in another thing. Well, then you got it. You got the pieces. So don't be shy about asking. Don't be shy about kind of making a summary statement to make sure that you got all the information that you need, because that's the first step. And it may just simply being a misunderstanding. If I go get the information, it's a misunderstanding, then the problem is solved. Oh, I can see exactly why you thought that way and did that thing. Okay, no problem. We're done. And it's that simple, just by doing the get, where I go get the information, where I go get what they were thinking, what their feelings are, what their opinion is, all of those kind of things. It could possibly solve the problem just right out of the chute. The second part of the model, give. After you have gotten the information, after you're certain that you understand and everybody acknowledges that you understand, then you give your thoughts and your feelings and your opinion. And once again, falls back to the very first thing I said, you got to check yourself, because you don't give your opinion by saying, well, I've thought for 100 years that you were nasty and blah, 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 and start talking about your in-laws and all of that kind of stuff. That's not how you solve problems. You solve problems by very clearly giving your opinion, your impressions in a think clinical, in an objective, clinical, clean way, free of the upset or the anger or the hurt feelings or the spoiled expectations, free of that stuff, which is my first obligation, is to check myself and make sure that I am communicating what really needs to be communicated. So then I give my opinion, I give my thoughts, I give my point of view, I give my idea about how I thought it should have gone, and I'm very concrete and I'm specific. I don't talk globally. Well, you always act like you know that I don't do anything. Well, No, she's talking about you didn't take out the trash. You forgot to take out the trash. And suddenly we're talking about you always are irresponsible. You always got this convenient memory, that kind of stuff. And the idea here is to be concrete and specific and be brief, be succinct, and use the last thing there, use I statements instead of we statements. We attributes meaning to somebody else, or it implies that you share this exact set of feelings that I have, and the other person may not, the organization may not, the family may not. And so if I say, this is how I feel, this is what I was thinking, rather than, well, we ought to be doing this, and we need to be doing that, and we need to be doing the other. I thought that we had agreed to do ABC. You say, instead of we decided to do so, and well, I didn't hear us decide. I don't remember when we decided. That's the counterpoint to the thing. Anyway, so you give your side of the equation, so to speak, after you've gotten the other side of the equation, and that's the give. Now, I have seen people use this in reverse, where the first step is give, and the second step is get, and sometimes that works as well. When you're dealing with your children, and ideally you've created an environment in your home where they're able to negotiate, and your children feel like they have a voice and they can say things that need to be said or important to them, etc. But they feel they can open their mouth and speak freely without it coming back to haunt them or hurt them too badly. Sometimes you come in, and the reason that I set that up about teenagers is because that's a frequent example. You come in and you had asked your child to do something. All right, I got to leave for work now. You're home. It's the summertime. You're home. I need you to clean up the kitchen. And I noticed that you guys' bathroom in the hall, it's getting in pretty rough shape. So please clean the bathroom before you go out and do anything or start playing the video games. I really need you to do that, because me and mom are going to be gone all day. We need that. So then you come home, and of course the kitchen's still a mess and the bathroom upstairs is still a mess. Then you call your kids, and then it's appropriate to give first. I asked you guys to clean up the kitchen and to clean up the bathroom. And the reason for that was me and mama are going to be gone all day long today, and you're here and you've gotten a little free time that we don't have. I thought it was reasonable that you guys chip in and clean up the kitchen and you clean up the bathroom. And so my question is, why did that not happen? Talk to me about why the bathroom's not clean. Talk to me about why the kitchen is not clean. So you gave first, and then you get as the second piece from them. Then they give you the information. And if it's anything like my life and rearing 3 teenagers, they're all grown now, but the rearing 3, it was usually a pretty pitiful excuse. But anyway, that's a total aside. So, but when they give you their input, well, we just didn't do it. We were playing video games. Okay, well, then you figure out the next step, which is merge. Then you figure out how do we go forward. I have my point of view. You have my point of view. Let's negotiate out a compromise. Let's negotiate a middle ground where both of your points of view have been expressed, and now you clarify what everybody has in this system, what everybody has invested in this, invested in a solution, etc. And you figure out some kind of common ground. Got to be a middle ground. Just about every problem in the world, there's a middle ground somewhere. We could figure this out. It's what in a macrocosm, that's what diplomacy is about. We can figure out somewhere in the middle that creates a win-win. Not everybody gets exactly what they want in every direction, but everybody would be okay with some kind of middle ground that is negotiated out, where we agree to stand, and what we agree to do. And so Kharkov called that merge. So you bring the 2 points of view together and merge them into a cohesive plan, into something that you're going to do, that he called go. And this is just where you put the solution in action. You go ahead and act on it. You take appropriate action. You follow through. You assess any new things that come up. and you implement the plan. But a sad thing is, a sad truth is, this is most frequently the portion of the model that's not done. People will sit down and they'll talk about it and they'll talk about it, and everybody will feel like they were understood. Then they'll try to figure out something to do, and well, maybe next time we can do so and so, and then they walk away and nothing ever happens. So this is the most important step in the plan, because this sets in motion the new habit. This sets in motion the solution that you have all agreed upon based on everybody's input. Now everybody feels like they can negotiate. Everybody feels like they had a voice. They may not have gotten exactly what they wanted, but they feel like they've got a voice in the situation. They got a voice in the problem, and ideally voice and a hand in the solution. So the give, get, go, merge and go model is very simple. It's very straightforward. It does start with me sorting out myself and figuring out what I'm so upset about, what I'm angry about, what I'm hurt about, and then setting that aside for just a minute so that I can get the information that I need to hopefully solve the problem. We can hear each other out. We can figure out some way to go forward. We can figure out a middle ground, and then we can create a plan and move along. Now, this model has successfully been used everywhere. Karkov developed it for his interpersonal skills model, like problem solving with clients in therapy was one of the original intents, but then it's been modified and used, like I said, in the prison system with guards and negotiators. It's been used in educational systems, in classrooms, in administration, in labor relations, in human resources, in the military. It's been used everywhere in the world over the last 40 years. But it's really simple. It's really straightforward. Starts with the tricky step, however, of me figuring out what's really going on with me and me working on the right thing, i.e. solving the problem, rather than overpowering or controlling or expressing my anger, the way that I want to express my anger. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel frustrated. All of those things are okay. What I do with them, though, then makes what the outcome right or wrong. If I lash out angrily, that's not a good thing to do. It's okay for me to be angry, but to lash out and hurt somebody else in my anger is not a good thing to do. Sets a really bad tone in your business, with your friends, in your family, everywhere you can think about. Lashing out angrily is destructive. And if I really am invested in solving the problem, creating solutions, then I first get a handle on how I'm feeling, so I can go check out, was this just a misunderstanding? I can then give information about how I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. We can figure out how to solve this thing, and we can go forward. In 4 easy steps, really simple. Anybody can do it. Starts with getting a handle on myself. But
David, that's a very clear and simple model. And for you or Barbara, I'd just like some thoughts. I grew up in a world of, I would say, a transactional leader. It's my way or the highway. That's the old style of leadership and the authoritative, dominated. I'm not interested in your opinion.
Right. A lot of our daddies, you and I had the same daddy, sounds like, Doug.
And the other thing I would like to ask in this model, there seems to be, and sometimes we call them toxic leaders. Other words might be a narcissistic leader who's not interested in getting information, but giving you their opinion and giving you instructions. That happens sometimes in marriages where one of the partners might be exercising narcissism, or with a leader that you're serving. So could y'all speak to those moments when you're trying to negotiate with someone with one of those 2 characteristics?
Yeah, I would really like to say, David, I love that model. And as Doug said, it's simple, but never easy, certainly never easy. And the part about that self-reflection, really understanding how you, what makes you tick, what the triggers are for you, how it works for you, that's crucial. And that speaks a little bit to what you just mentioned, Doug, because if someone isn't interested, you need to have two interested parties to resolve a conflict. If there's no interest to resolve or no investment in resolving the conflict, and it's just going to be one way or another, a winner and a loser, so to speak, then you don't have a forum for conflict resolution that David just presented. So it's very tricky. It's not easy for sure. I'm sorry, Doug, I don't want to run over what you talked about because that's extremely important, and maybe David wants to address that.
Well, let me tag on to something you said first, Barbara, though. You said the triggers that we have. Let me take that a step forward. And Doug, I promise I'm going to come back and address yours because it's a wonderful, wonderful question. Because I love these people in my family, because I love my friends, but hopefully I like most of the people that I work with. But because of those feelings toward those people, I seek to be understanding of their triggers too. You know, I know how my wife grew up. I know the things that, what her family was like, the things that she learned in her system. She knows the things that I have been through, the things that I learned in my system, and we're kind to each other to the best of our ability, and we try to avoid those triggers. And frequently you have been around in your life somebody, and this segues back to General Carver's question. You've been around people who know every one of your buttons. They know every one of your soft, wounded places, and they push them every dadgum chance they can. And they take that finger, those narcissistic leaders and those toxic kind of leaders, they take that finger and poke it right in that wounded place every time they can. They assess us, and they then prey, P-R-E-Y, prey on our disabilities, so to speak, or our vulnerabilities, better word, our vulnerabilities like that. And it does create toxic environments. And the only way that I know to deal with that, and the only thing that I've ever seen be effective with that, comes at a great cost, because the only solution that I know of is for you to speak directly to it. And say that it really feels, in this environment, it frequently feels toxic. And it does not feel like an environment in which people can grow. Now that's dangerous to do, because you probably need that job, or you want desperately to keep those relationships. So the potential is that it comes at great cost. But for many people who are only interested in power, who are only interested in serving themselves, there's not going to be a middle ground. How do you negotiate with somebody who just has it out for you? I don't know how to do that. If they're not willing to come to the middle, if they're not willing to have conversation, if all they want to do is have power and seek control over you, I don't know how to move to a good position other than be very aware of my own feelings and be speaking them frankly and directly, not in a pejorative way, not accusing anybody. You're such a jerk and you're beautiful. No, not that. I feel like nothing that I do matters. I feel like I can put in my best efforts and it still not be good enough. And I don't like feeling like that. I don't want to feel like that way anymore. Make very direct statements like that.
Yeah, let me just kind of follow on with that, Barbara. There's a question from the audience. They love the model, but this individual says, I can't get my spouse to listen to me. They're always right. How can I get them to get from me what I'm trying to say?
Barbara, go ahead. You were about to say something.
It's sort of related, Doug, maybe doesn't exactly answer that at the moment, but this model, it's obvious that this taught at a very early stage of family life, marriage, whatever, relationship, it will work. It's pretty difficult as you go along and as you have many, many things stacked up in those areas of conflict to break through. I guess the best answer for that is that maybe one of the partners is more evolved in understanding how that works. And I don't mean that in a superiority kind of definition, but more in tune with what it takes to resolve conflict. And I would think that that party would need to be extremely patient and find the words, find the dialogue, find the way to have that conversation with the spouse, so that the spouse eventually doesn't come to the table feeling that it's going to be a win-lose situation, or that someone is going to master something over him or her. That may be a way to neutralize that. I love John Gottman's work, and one of the things that he talks about is the difference between complaining and criticizing. A complaint is about whatever that thing is that you don't like, that thing that's not working for you, that thing that needs fixing. But criticism is really the personality, the heart of the person. So maybe in that question, the party who says the wife never budges from that position needs to take a look at, what am I saying? How am I approaching it? Is there something that feels immediately like we're at battle, as opposed to we're going to solve something?
I like that, and it gets about 9 wheels turning in my head, which is a problem for me. Sometimes I'll be thinking 9 things at once, and my mouth can't wrap around all of them, so I have to try to sort it a bit. One thing that might work is, if you think about the model, the get, give, merge, and go. How do I get my wife to either listen to me or give me the information that I need? What if you practiced getting, where she doesn't really want to talk about, she doesn't want to give you the information that you are seeking, she doesn't want to listen to you. What if you start by listening to her? Sit down, she comes in from work or you come in from work, and you say to her, how was your day? Tell me what you did. Tell me what went on. And then an hour later, everybody's now, changed clothes and been fed. And I grew up in Alabama, so I got my shoes off, and so that my brain can work again. And I now move and I say, how are you feeling? Tell me how you felt as your day progressed, because some of that sounded like it might have been overwhelming or frustrating or difficult, or whatever, fill in any of the words. So then I am invested in training her. And I don't know if any of y'all have ever noticed this, but husbands and wives train each other the way that's probably not true in your relationship, Barbara, because I know Mike, and he's potentially untrainable. But anyway, we train each other how we're going to interact. And if I am training her to tell me about her feelings, to tell me about her day, to engage me for conversation, maybe, just maybe, she'll reciprocate. And one day when I come in and I say, I had a really tough day and I just need to talk to somebody for just a minute. And then that can progress to, like you're describing, Barbara, complaining versus criticizing. Because frequently when we get in arguments, we run each other down. It's just the absolute truth, because we're trying to we're adversaries now, and we're trying to gain an upper position, the superior position. And that's destructive, because marriage, we're supposed to be equally yoked, and we're supposed to stand shoulder to shoulder. There is a real enemy, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the real enemy, and it's not us. So if we can recognize and get out of that adversarial position, we're going to be better off.
Or even if you're going to have an engagement, speaking from the military side, you at least agree on the rules of engagement, as we would say. How you're going to fight, you don't change the rules in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
I've got a question here for
I hope that answered that question about maybe how to get my wife involved to listen to me a little better.
Thank you. Certainly. This has to do with a military couple. They've traveled, I believe they've had 9 deployments, 15 years. The marriage has ended in an uncontested divorce. 3 kids, 2 of them are teens. The wife has custody of the kids. She says, my teenage children are angry and emotional. A frequent outburst, Mom, you've ruined my life. I'll never be happy again. Would one of you like to address that? Because obviously we have challenges with our with our kids, and whether you're in the military or not, but that's this particular situation. Any help for this spouse?
May I just say, David, that, you know, as you say that, Doug, it's very sad, and there's a grieving there. And I think that needs to be addressed first, that time to be able to talk about what the losses are, not moving immediately to how do we fix this, how do we have a decent relationship with each other. Back to what David said earlier, where everyone has a voice, where everyone is heard. It seems like that would be very, very necessary for everyone to express what exactly in their life is ruined, so to speak, you know, and how they perceive what has happened and what where their expectations are of what's coming forth after this.
Aubrey, I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I said, what do you think, David? What do you
Oh, I'm
think,
sorry.
Doug?
Well, I wanted to kind of keep you going, to stimulate you a bit. You have had a military marriage. You were married to the Army. You were married to Mike, and via that, we're married to the Army for all those years. And there are some dynamics that go into a marital relationship for career folks and veterans that are somewhat different than the civilian world. Could I get you to talk about that for just a minute, and some of those dynamics that people need to be aware of and look out for? Then we'll talk about this divorce.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting question for me, you know, and what our family composition is 2 sons, and our sons were always at, you know, fragile ages. They are 8 years apart in their ages, and it was very different. It was one dialogue with one who was much younger, and another dialogue with the other. And Michael was their world, is their world, and they relied on him a lot. So there was a lot of sadness. A lot of that had to be addressed before we could just move on and do something different. And then the connectivity. Michael remained very connected and very, very involved in what was going on with them, which was very, very, very helpful for them as well. You know, and then also fostering that relationship between the boys, that they were able to sort of share with each other. I think the siblings are so important to each other, and where there's conflict resolution in the sibling subset, it's very important so that they have those moments and can do that. But yeah, that's a very difficult situation. And then, of course, for the spouses to work out whatever conflicts, whatever disagreements, whatever things have come up along the way, and to address those and have pretty rapid solutions when there's a constant rhythm of in and out, and, you know, kind of not single parenting, so to speak, on the home front.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that completely speaks to what you were talking about, David, but that's how
you were absolutely perfect. But because what you described was your really heightened awareness of all the variables that are going on in that system at any given time. You have the variable of the different ages in the siblings. You have the variable of the demands of the military. You have the variable of single parenting. So while the spouse is deployed, so many different variables go in, but frequently I lose sight of all of that, and I just feel bad, and all I can focus on is my bad feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then my kids, well, no wonder they're upset. No wonder they're angry, because I'm self-focused when the system is demanding that I be other-focused right now. And that's one of those tough things that you have to do frequently as an adult. You know, I tell my clients, because I practice, I'm a practicing therapist as well as a teacher. I tell my students, a big problem with adulting every day is frequently the decisions you have to make are between sucks and sucks even worse. And I gotta brace myself and just go do sucks, because that minimizes the damage that sucks even worse was going to cause. Well, if I have self-focus, then the decisions I make out of self-focus is going to set up a set of dominoes for sucks even worse things happening. But if I will suspend that for just a minute, and I'll be other focused, and I'll take care of my kids and address those needs and those variables with my kids, my life's going to be better as a byproduct. Because I already feel bad, and now my teenagers are heaping more bad on me, then it just makes things worse. And so I'll go with sucks and try to avoid the sucks even worse. And I'll address my kids' needs and use the model. I'll get from them the struggle. And I think you're exactly right. I think they are aggrieved. Mom ruined their life, i.e., she left their dad. Well, they still love their dad. That they ought to still love their dad, and it's perfectly appropriate for them to be terribly hurt when dad's been cut off, or vice versa. You left mom. It's a perfectly appropriate for me to be angry and upset about that, and to feel like my life is over. Well, it's over, but the life we had is indeed over, and that needs to be grieved. So I'm sorry. General Carver, you were going to say something, and I just babbled and babbled.
From both of you guys. You had me on the sucks and sucks worse. I had that too.
We all wrote that down.
In 2002, and we were greeted by a burly sergeant major who told us how bad the desert was going to be, and he said, "Embrace the suck." That's how you embrace it. Okay, we've got time, I think, for one more question, and this has to deal with a first responder's spouse. Our concern is that the spouse has constantly gone to public disaster events where they're constantly being exposed not only to danger, but in the context of the coronavirus. And so there's really a concern about the spouse bringing the virus home while he or she is putting out the fires, for public safety. Could you address? I mean, it's not been addressed by the spouse, but it's a great concern. So how do we deal with that one?
Barbara, I feel like I've talked so much, and you're just brilliant, and I want to respect that and make sure that you have a good.
You are a very encouraging teacher. I can tell. Anyway, well, I will start, but I'm sure you'll have more to say, David. I think that it's terribly important to understand that the party that has to go out and do this every single day, and definitely the home front and protecting and keeping safe the home front is equally important, an equally enormous job to have to face. But it seems like it's something that can't be avoided. It has to happen. If that's what your spouse does or someone is doing and needs to be there, needs to be present, probably the best thing that can be done is to make a plan, what David talked about earlier, negotiate, have some kind of plan in place of what is going to help you to feel as safe as you can feel in that situation. And to a certain extent, some of it is just not going to feel safe. And so there is going to have to be some acceptance there and acknowledgement of this is our life. This is how it is and what we do. But to have some sort of plan in place that makes everyone feel as comfortable as possible. I think we talked in the past, or it was brought up, that there's a ritual of sorts with, cleansing, doing everything that's possible to keep the environment as free of all of the things we're worried about right now as can be before re-entry, before coming back into the house. I picture astronauts and everything they have to go through, but some modification of that maybe is what's needed to have everybody relax and feel well. And then whatever the other precautions are, taking the tests, checking out each day and making sure that everything is safe. But certainly that is a very big concern for first responders and their families, certainly.
And I would add to that I think in any marriage, in any close relationship, that I need to be sensitive to my partner. I need to be sensitive to what they're going on. And you know that this first responder is out there every day doing the best that they can do, and they're hustling. And at the same time, they're feeling like they're letting their family down because they're quote, putting their family in danger, end quote. They're already got a stressful job because literally their life's on the line. You know, mama doesn't know if when daddy walks out the door, if he's coming home in the morning. Daddy doesn't know if mama's gonna come home tonight after her shift. And then on top of that, I am going to expose my family to some kind of terrible illness and potentially fatal illness. It has got to be weighing on that first responder's mind. So if possible, I would encourage the person again to set self aside and focus on other. So if my spouse is going out every day in harm's way, I am worried about that, but I, like you said, Barbara, the perfect language. It's okay for me to voice my worry, but not criticize my spouse because she is out there doing this thing. Well, I don't know why you had to do this. And you're just risking everybody that voice of criticism, that tone, because you know he or she's already kicking themselves anyway for the potential risk that they're bringing in. So if I can be other focused instead of self-focused during this time of stress, ideally we'll come back together and everything will be equal again. But right now, frequently marriages require that. Everybody says it's 50-50, but I've had a lot of experiences where it was 97-3 both ways. You know, I need the 97 sometimes, and she needs the 97 sometimes. And I know that I fail miserably, but I in those instances to be other focused rather than self-focused. And we'll get back to 50-50 ideally pretty quick. So.
Thank you both. I feel like we could go on for hours. You've provided such excellent teaching through the Get, Give, Merge, Go model, and then the dialogue between Barbara, you and David. And it's just been wonderful. I've been thinking the entire time, David, since you first began talking about, and it starts with me, how I'm feeling before I speak and listen. It seems that in this whole area of conflict resolution, we really need to be better listeners. And if I can get spiritual here for just a moment, in the book of James, it says that we are to be quick to hear, slow to speak, and then slow to anger. I don't know if you have any commentary to add to that, but it's really that same application of which you presented today.
You're exactly right. And dovetailing neatly with that is Paul's admonition to take every thought captive. And before this thing rolls out of my mouth, I need to have looked at it to make sure that this is going to be helpful versus hurtful, and encouraging and constructive rather than discouraging and destructive. So no, that's a perfect way to wrap it up. It's really,
Thank you,
really
David. Barbara?
Yes, no, wonderful, Doug. That's wonderful. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you.
Well, David and Barbara, thank you for the expertise in which you have brought to this very, very brief session. And I want to thank also all of you who are attending and listening to this wonderful webinar on conflict resolution. And again, as we said at the very beginning, as we see our cities trying to maintain law and order, how maybe one of the solutions would be that we listen to each other more attentively, because conflict resolution is essential, I believe, not only for survival in our families, but survival in our communities, nation, and the world. Hey, if you'd like to have more information regarding Warrior to Citizen, because what you've just attended today is a portion of the many lecture series and the resources and some of the on-site training that is provided to veterans, their families, first responders, and their families. And we would invite you to just look at our website at warriortocitizen.org. That's warrior, the number 2, citizen.org, where you can find more information on this wonderful program. Our next webinar, as I recall, in a couple of weeks, we will be addressing the issue of brokenness and looking at suicide prevention, as well as talking about a new issue that we've addressed. It's referred to as moral injury. So we would invite you to be a part of that here in a couple of weeks. Stay tuned for the information regarding that webinar. Again, thank you to our guest lecturers. Mike, thank you as always for your wonderful leadership, and to the audience, we thank you for your time today. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.